Sometimes, the real danger doesn't come from the darkness outside, but from the eyes watching you from the other side of the wall. This story is inspired by true events. It happened in an ordinary neighborhood, on a quiet street where no one imagined something so disturbing could ever take place. It's about an ordinary woman, living what seemed like a normal life, until the signs began. Objects out of place, doors left ajar, and an unsettling feeling that something, or someone, was always nearby. By the time she discovered the truth, it was already too late to return to normal. Amelia Morris was a single mum living with her 8-year-old daughter in a small flat in the suburbs of Brisbane. She worked from home as a graphic designer and followed a simple routine. Wake up early, make breakfast, walk her daughter to school, work through the day, have dinner in front of the telly, and go to bed early. The flat was her refuge, her safe space, or at least, that's what she believed. It all started with little inconveniences. A remote control sitting on the table when she was certain she'd left it on the couch. A kitchen cupboard found unlocked, even though she always kept it shut for her daughter's safety. Amelia questioned herself, assumed she was distracted or overtired. She laughed it off, until the noises began. They were faint sounds in the night, the soft creak of floorboards, a doorknob turning without pressure, the laundry door closing gently. The building was old, so she blamed the wind, the plumbing, the timber frame. But deep down, she knew something wasn't right. A discomfort started to grow quietly, like a whisper pressing on her chest. One early morning, as she got up for a glass of water, Amelia noticed the front door slightly open. She always locked the door. Always. Her stomach churned. She checked on her daughter, peacefully asleep. She searched the flat in silence, heart racing. Nothing out of place. Nothing obvious, at least. The next morning, she changed the lock. Installed extra bolts. Mentioned it to the neighbor next door, who said she hadn't heard a thing. The building was quiet, with few residents, mostly retirees. Only the man from the unit above, a bloke named Patrick, seemed more withdrawn. He barely said hello. Always wore a cap and headphones, walked down the stairs like he was trying not to be noticed. That night, Amelia decided to install a camera in the hallway inside her unit. Just to be sure. Just so she could sleep. The next morning, Amelia woke up with a tightness in her chest. The camera she'd installed in the hallway was basic, connected to her phone. Still in bed, eyes barely open, she launched the app. Nothing unusual, until around 2 a.m. That's when the image froze her blood. A shadow. A male figure standing right in front of the front door. He didn't knock, didn't move for several seconds. Just stood there, motionless, as if he were listening. Watching. Then, slowly, he crouched down and touched the doorknob. The footage shook slightly, capturing the moment the door shifted a centimeter inward. But it didn't open. The lock held firm. The man then vanished out of frame, not in a hurry, as if nothing had happened. Amelia paused the video, rewound it, watched it again. Her hands were sweating. Her first instinct was to run to the police, but the footage was inconclusive. Blurry image, low lighting. No face, no clear evidence. When she phoned the building manager, he was vague. Said all tenants had keys to the hallway, that nothing had been reported. But promised to review the security cameras at the main entrance. That afternoon, she saw Patrick, the neighbor from upstairs, walking up the stairs. For the first time, he looked her straight in the eye. The look was neutral, but something about his expression unsettled her. It wasn't his face exactly, but the way he paused for a second. As if waiting for her to say something. As if he knew. In the days that followed, the noises returned. Clearer now. Footsteps above the ceiling, slow and deliberate. Objects subtly moved. A glass that had been on the bench now sat on the lounge room floor. Amelia started to feel watched. It wasn't paranoia anymore. It was something real. She installed a second camera, this time inside the lounge room, facing the front door. She began sleeping with her phone beside the bed, in total silence, heart heavy. Her daughter, still innocent, sensed nothing except her mother's tense mood. She kept asking if something was wrong, and Amelia smiled to protect her, trying to keep things normal. One night soon after, the phone buzzed. Motion detected. Amelia jolted upright and played the footage immediately. What she saw nearly stopped her heart. The figure again. But this time, inside the house. The recording showed a man walking slowly through the lounge, without turning on a single light, as if he knew every detail of the space. He walked towards the hallway, where her daughter's room was, then disappeared from view. Amelia screamed instinctively. She rushed to her daughter's room. The girl was sound asleep. She searched every room, but no one else was there. The intruder had left, or was still inside. That night, Amelia didn't sleep. For the first time, she knew with absolute certainty, someone was getting into her home. The day broke under the weight of a night that seemed endless. Amelia, with sunken eyes and a mind on constant alert, could no longer tell reality from exhaustion. The footage from the lounge room camera was now her only anchor, the only thing that justified what she was going through. It was proof. Evidence that someone truly was breaking into her home. She took the footage to the local police station, but the response was lukewarm. The officer watched the video with a skeptical look, shaking his head. The image was dark, the figure indistinct. With no clear identification, no signs of forced entry, and the intruder not having taken anything, the case was marked as inconclusive. They suggested Amelia upgrade her security, change the locks, install extra bolts, and referred her to a private security contact. Frustration mixed with fear. She wasn't just unsafe, she was being ignored. Silenced by a system that didn't seem to consider her word enough. Even with evidence in hand, the sense of helplessness only grew stronger. Determined to take matters into her own hands, Amelia bought more cameras. Installed sensors on the windows and video doorbells on every external access point. She began monitoring every corner of the flat through her phone. Sleep came in fragments. She'd wake at every alert, living among whispers and the constant tension that something, or someone, might appear at any moment. Patrick's behavior was growing stranger by the day. He rarely left his flat, and when they crossed paths in the hallway, his stares were long and fixed. Never a greeting. Never an apology for the noises, the frights. It was as if that silence was part of some sadistic game, and only he knew the rules. One afternoon, Amelia came home to something new. Her daughter's favorite doll, the one that always stayed in the little girl's bedroom, was now sitting on the lounge room couch, facing the front door. Her daughter swore she hadn't moved it. Amelia froze. Someone had been in the flat again, and this time, they'd left a message. The air grew heavier. The paranoia, more suffocating. She began to question whether she was losing her mind, if the videos were real, or just the product of her exhaustion. But deep down, she knew, she was being watched, manipulated, invaded, and no one else seemed to see it. That's when she decided, watching wasn't enough. She needed to expose it. She needed to understand what Patrick knew, and why he made her feel like a prisoner in her own home. That night, Amelia didn't sleep. She sat in the lounge room, lights off, eyes locked on her phone screen, which streamed live footage from the cameras placed around the flat. Every noise, every shadow captured made her heart race. The doll was still on the couch, like a silent totem, marking that something had changed. It was no longer about suspicion, it was about confrontation. Over the following nights, she began to notice a pattern. Always around 2:30 a.m., the hallway camera would glitch, just a few seconds of black screen, as if something had shut it down momentarily. At that same time, the motion sensor by the front door would blink briefly. An invisible visitor? A system error? Or someone who knew the blind spots? Amelia then decided to install a micro camera, hidden inside the lounge room bookshelf, aimed directly at the door. Unlike the others, this one wasn't connected to the network. It recorded to a local memory card. She wanted something that couldn't be intercepted. The next morning, with swollen eyes and trembling hands, she reviewed the footage. At 2:32 a.m., the door opened slowly. No forced entry. No struggle. The figure entered silently, soft footsteps, dark clothing. Even with his face partially covered, Amelia recognized something that sent a chill down her spine. The watch on his left wrist. The same one she'd seen many times in the lift. Patrick. He moved through the lounge room like he owned the place. Studied the pictures on the wall, touched the cushions, took a deep breath. He paused in front of the doll, gently adjusted it on the couch with an almost fatherly care, and then turned to face the camera, the hidden one. For a few seconds, he stared straight into it. A look that said, "I know." Amelia's world crumbled. He knew he was being filmed. He knew she was watching him. And yet, he kept coming. as if each appearance was part of some twisted game, carefully designed to terrify without leaving a trace. She grabbed the footage and rushed to the police. This time, there was no denying it. The image was clear. The break-in, undeniable. And the man's identity, unmistakable. A warrant was issued that very day. But what the police uncovered left everyone stunned. Inside Patrick's flat, along with copies of Amelia's keys, and those of other neighbors, they found a small locked room. Inside were personal belongings, photos, clothing, and even toys that belonged to Amelia's daughter. A shrine of obsession. A space devoted to a life he never had, but tried to possess, night after night. The truth, finally revealed, was darker than Amelia had ever imagined. It wasn't just a violation of space. It was a violation of identity, and she had only just escaped in time. After Patrick's arrest, Amelia hoped peace would finally return to her home. But the silence in the house, instead of comforting her, now felt heavier, more oppressive. She sensed something was missing, as if the normality she so desperately longed for was within reach, yet still out of grasp. It felt like everything would go back to how it was, but the truth was, her life would never be the same. Patrick's arrest happened quickly, but the emotional impact it left behind was devastating. She could no longer look at her flat the same way. Every corner seemed to hold memories of the terror she'd lived through. The paintings on the wall, the chair in the lounge, the doll on the couch, all still there, just as before, yet now silent witnesses to something irreversible. With each passing day, fear disguised itself as a normality that no longer made sense. Even with Patrick behind bars, the little glitches in the security system, the blind spots in the cameras, and that lingering fear of being watched made her feel like the invasion wasn't truly over. She spent her days re-watching the footage from the cameras, looking for answers. She wanted to understand every movement, every step Patrick had taken. She hoped to find something that explained his obsessive behavior, something that would make her feel like it was really over. But the feeling that she was still being watched, that something was still out of place, wouldn't leave her. She focused on one particular clip, a recording from the night before the arrest, one she hadn't paid attention to before. It was a 90-minute video, but right at the end of the footage, something subtle appeared, a reflection in the window. At first, it looked like a trick of the light, but Amelia knew better. It was the outline of a figure. A quick movement, like someone watching her from outside, through the glass. Patrick? Or someone else? Doubt crept in once again, and with it, that quiet fear. Amelia decided to reinforce her security measures. Replace the cameras again. Upgrade the locks. Install more advanced alarm systems. But even then, the sense of vulnerability only seemed to grow. She didn't want to be paranoid. She didn't want to live in fear. But how could she ignore what had happened? How could she just turn the page and move on when her very own space had been violated in such a brutal, intimate way? She was tired of fighting fear. Tired of living with uncertainty. But at the same time, she knew she couldn't let it win. As she looked at her life, at the house she now called home, Amelia realized that the biggest challenge wouldn't be rebuilding her physical security. The real challenge would be rebuilding her trust. Trust in people. Trust in herself. And above all, trust in the silence. The silence that once felt so safe now made her feel a hidden presence, something she couldn't control. The fear that someone was watching her every move, that Patrick's eyes, or someone else's, were always nearby, made her feel like she was being watched even when no one was there. And so, caught between the silence and the constant feeling of being observed, Amelia came to understand that perhaps the real terror was no longer the intruder himself, but the ongoing doubt, the quiet mistrust that hung in the air like an invisible shadow. Always there. Always waiting for her next mistake. As Amelia tried to rebuild her life, the truth about Patrick began to spread. And, as is often the case, the pieces of the puzzle finally started to fall into place. What once seemed like an isolated incident, the obsession of one man with strange behavior, turned out to be a pattern long overlooked by the other tenants in the building. After Patrick's arrest, the police launched a deeper investigation. Searches were conducted in neighboring flats, and soon more clues were uncovered. In the flat of an elderly resident, his wife, in a moment of emotional release, admitted she had always suspected Patrick. She spoke of strange noises in the corridor, of doors slamming shut at odd hours, and a lingering feeling that someone was always nearby. "I always felt like he had his eyes on all of us," she said, a mix of regret and relief in her voice, as if something deeply disturbing had finally been brought to light. In another flat, a young mother with small children shared similar experiences. She had once found what appeared to be an anonymous note in her letterbox, saying things only she and her daughter could have known. It seemed Patrick had developed an obsession with the intimate details of their lives, as though he knew their daily routines, the conversations between mother and child. But no one ever imagined he'd actually broken into their homes, not until Amelia exposed the full extent of his actions. The stories began to add up, and a sense of neglect settled over the building. For years, the warning signs had been there, but they'd been ignored. Now, in the wake of the shocking truth, everyone began to question how blind they'd been to what had been happening right under their noses. The terror was no longer a secret confined to Amelia's flat. It had spread, quietly, through the walls of the building, and no one knew just how closely they had been watched. Patrick's arrest seemed like the end of the nightmare for Amelia, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was still wrong. Even with police assuring her he'd never harm anyone again, that lingering sense of unease remained, like an unwanted shadow hanging over her. Amelia kept trying to convince herself that the worst was over. The case was all over the news, and the footage from the security cameras, showing Patrick invading her space, was now undeniable proof of his guilt. That look he gave the camera, as if he knew he was being watched, still echoed in her mind. In the stillness of the night, those images crept back in. The trauma, born from fear and the overwhelming sense of insecurity, wasn't going away anytime soon. No matter how hard she tried to push the memories aside, the dread still lingered. And the way he had stared at her, through the screen, straight into her soul, felt more real than ever. On top of that, the outrage among the neighbors meant what happened was far from forgotten. How had evil hidden itself so well? How had no one noticed what was happening right under their noses? Neighbors who once seemed carefree were now visibly unsettled. Some claimed they'd always felt something strange in the corridors. Others had started peeking through their curtains, as if Patrick's darkness had infected the entire building. But it was about to get worse. That's when Amelia began receiving anonymous letters. Letters that said things only Patrick could possibly know. Personal details, her daily routines, even things she'd said to her daughter the night they installed the cameras. How did he know that, if he was behind bars? What else had he done that no one knew about? She tried to trace the letters, but their origins vanished as quickly as they appeared. Patrick's arrest hadn't brought her peace. Only more questions. More uncertainty. Was he really acting alone? Amelia knew, deep down, that something was still out there, watching from the shadows of her life like a ghost. Evil doesn't just vanish. It changes shape. It adapts. It finds the cracks, always. What she couldn't be sure of was whether the true threat was really locked away, or whether the stalker was still out there, watching her from a distance, waiting for the right time to strike again. Amelia's story may have ended, but the doubt remains. Sometimes, monsters don't have to be physically real. They hide in places we can't reach, waiting, silent. And not all monsters are supernatural. For Amelia, Patrick's imprisonment was just a false sense of safety. Because fear never left her. If this true story shook you, don't forget to like, comment, and share. Got a spine-chilling story of your own, about stalkers or anything else that gave you goosebumps, and want to see it brought to life here on the channel? Reach out to us. Your identity will be kept completely anonymous. And remember, your safety, your privacy, they come first.